Alright, welcome back to part 5 of the series in making an asteroids game. In this section we are going to create the thrust effect here. And when the ship moves in a direction, you'll see that he lets off a little exhaust there, kind of indicating that he is thrusting here, and you see it kind of fades away when I let go. And you'll see it travels with him when he jumps the screen there. So that's what we're going to do here. It's the one part of it's going to be fairly easy and a lot of copying from the bullet, but other parts are going to be a little bit harder to explain. So just stay tuned. Okay, just like with the bullet, in order to start this, we need to create a thrust sprite here. Now, I recommend just doing what I'm doing here with this little sprite here. Now we can duplicate the bullet sprite. Um, to do that, you can either click on it and go Control D, or you can right click and go duplicate, and that creates another sprite here. Go and open up the duplicate there. We're going to rename it object or sprite thrust. Oops, spell it correctly. Again, you got to make sure remember how to spell it. I'm going to go ahead and edit the image, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of it. I hit Control A, and I'm going to hit the delete key. And again, for those of you using Macs, it's not backspace. If you're using a Windows machine, it's the actual delete button. And so what this did was, now I don't have to resize everything. It's still 5 by 5, which is a good size for what we want to use here. Now the colors I'm using are blue, if you saw my thrust there. So I'm going to use dark blue color. So I'm going to use this as my background color. So I'm going to click that. Again, I'm going to pick the round brush, and I'm going to set it to 5 right here, and set it to smooth, and that gives me this circle right here. And then I'm going to pick a lighter blue, that one right there, and again I'm going to set the size down to 3, leave it at smooth, and go like that. And you kind of see there is what it looks like right there. Okay. You know what, that outer blue may be a little bit too dark, but if we don't like it, we can always come back and change it. So I'm going to get out of this, and let me close the room here too. And so you can see now here's my new sprite, and so you can see that is there. Now the other good thing we can do here is a lot of the programming for the thrust is the same as the bullet, so we can duplicate the bullet as well. So I'm going to click on the bullet here, again right click and duplicate, or I could do Control D, double click on that. We're going to change the name to object thrust. Make sure I spell it correctly. Okay, and I'm going to change the sprite to our thrust sprite there. And we're going to change one thing in the step event. We don't want it to last 3 seconds. The longer it lasts, let me fix these windows here. The longer it lasts, the longer the tail is going to be, and sometimes that'll start looking weird. So what I had it set to before was about 3/4 of a second, and again, this is something you can adjust later on. So I'm going to set it to 0.75 or 0.75. Let me do that so it's a little bit easier to see. 0.75. That's how many seconds this is going to last, but the rest of the coding here is the same for this. Now the other difference we're going to need is on the ship itself, we're going to have it create the thrust object when we press the thrust key, the W key in this case. So I'm going to open up the ship, and I'm going to find my thrusting action right there, my thrusting event. So I'm going to click on that, open up my code here, and again I'm going to shrink these down so we can see a little bit better here. Close this, move some stuff around. Okay, so going to do now is we are going to create, just like we did with the bullet. In fact, we could even copy the code from the space firing here. I'm going to go to the space event there and see this code right here. All of this, I'm just going to click and highlight, make sure you get all the way to the end. I'm just going to copy this, go Control C, and then go back to thrusting. And I'm going to go down a couple of lines and hit Control V. So that puts that code in the same area here. Now we need to make a few changes here. We are still creating it at our location on the instances layer, but now we're creating the thrust object, not the bullet. Okay. So we changed that to thrust. Let me move this over so you can make sure that we don't have anything on the edge here. And all of this is going to be the same, except for, instead of now being pushed forward at a speed of 5, we're going to change this. Now it's going to be, we want it to be pushed backwards, away from the rear of the ship. So I'm going to go negative number, and I'm just going to go -1 because it doesn't need to get pushed that far. Okay? And that's it. Let's test the game, and you'll see now we should have thrust coming from the back of our ship, some rocket fuel. Now you see that's kind of long there. So we can change it so it's visible for too long here. So I'm gonna go and shrink my number. So again, that is on the thrust object itself. So double click there. And right here, this is the amount of time. So I'm going to go to 0.25 to a quarter second. That looked pretty long. So let's try it again. Well, see, now that's too short. You may like it that way, but that's a little bit too short. You might as well not even have it. So let's change that again. Instead of 0.25, let's go 0.5, which is halfway between 0.75 and 5, and see how that looks. A little bit better. Maybe we could shoot it down a little bit less. Okay, so we've got the thrust here now going. Now the only problem is, if you'll see here, if I go across, every time I cross a threshold here, going across across the side here, we get a weird effect where it has to start over again. And again, when you're going really fast, it's hard to see, but let me go slower so you can kind of see. Okay, see, especially if I go off the side here, of course it's not doing it. Or if I'm going, see, it kind of gives you a weird effect here. What we have to do in order to fix that is we got to do a little trick of the eye here. What we're going to do is make it so that it draws that thrust on all 4 sides here. This is one of those things that it's a lot of work for just a little bit of improvement in the game, but a lot of times it's the little things that make people get more into the game. So this is something I think overall is worth adding to it, just to make it a little bit nicer looking. So what we have to do is we basically have to, again, draw that thrust not only where it needs to be, but we need to draw one on the left side, on the right side, up at the top and the bottom, so that when our ship is off the screen, it will have another one. Again, I'm probably not explaining it very well, but trust me, it works out a little bit better. So the way we do that is we're going to add a new event to the thrust. Okay, so let me open that up. Let me back out here. Zoom in just a little bit here. Make sure you were on the thrust object. Let me close side there. And we're going to add a draw event. And this is the code we're going to do. We're going to do a little bit of, you go draw, draw. Again, let me zoom in on the code here. And we need a little more room here. And I'm not sure how I want to describe this. So this part, all this lines of code here are completely optional. So I'm going to just take it out this time. So I won't have any kind of description here. You see it disappears. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the draw it in the 4 additional top left side, top and bottom here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to tell it that I want to draw it at whatever out transparency value my sprite is. So remember, this thing fades away just like the bullet does. So as the older it is, it starts fading. So I'm going to go draw set alpha. Notice this is a different command than when we set the image alpha. This is because this is a drawing command. We're actually going to draw our sprite instead of just it being there. It's actually going to be drawn. So draw set alpha image alpha. So we're setting our drawing transparency to whatever our sprite's transparency happens to be. Then we're going to go draw self. And what this does is just draw the sprite in its current location as is. Now this is where we're going to start drawing our copies. So we're going to draw sprite, and then it is, if you notice down at the bottom, it's asking us it's telling us what it needs. Right now I need the name of the sprite, SPR thrust, and then subimage. There's only one subimage, so we could just put 0 here. There is no 1, but if you don't know, you just put -1. And in this case, we don't know, we don't care, there's only 1, so we just put -1 there. And then we want to tell it that we want it to be basically a room, half of a room width away from us, or I'm sorry, a room width away from us, like if the thing was off screen there. So this is our X position. Now again, you're just going to have to trust me on this if you don't understand the geometry of it here. But just type this, make sure it is you type it, spelling is the same and everything. X minus room, whoops, move this cursor out of the way, room width minus object ship dot ship size. Oops, I gotta make sure I spell it. Now this is the variable that we created in the ship that determined how big this ship was. Okay, so we got to make sure that stays in there. And then Y. Okay, so what I'm telling it to do is draw a sprite, and I want to draw the thrust sprite, and I don't care what subimage it is. And then this is my X position. It's my X position minus room width minus the width of the ship. Okay. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line 4 times. Well, actually, I'm just going to, I'm going to copy it. Let's go 3 times. Copy it, and then I'm going to paste it 3 times. Now these next 2 lines here are going to be, the next one here is going to be, instead of these minuses, you're going to put pluses. So this will draw it on the right side. The first line drew it to the left, the second line will draw it to the right. Then the next group here is we've got to move stuff around here. So now our X, and we're going to go up and down. So our X is going to have a comma here. And then we're going to take this Y, delete it and the comma behind it, and we're going to put Y minus room width, and then we want to change this to room height now, since now we're dealing with vertical, minus object shift size. Okay, then I'm going to duplicate this line, and I'm going to change the minuses to plus. And now the third line would draw him to the above you, and then this line here will draw it down below you. Okay. Now we're going to run this, and you're going to see kind of a strange thing happening. If I click the play thing, and then we'll add one final line of code to fix that. If you look at my ship here, when I start thrusting, whoops, we've got an error here. This is what an error message looks like, so I'll give you a chance here to look at this. Right here it tells where what object the problem is, object thrust. It is in the draw event, and it's telling me that it doesn't know what object, ship, unknown variable, not set. Okay, so let's abort that. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second so I can figure out what the error is, and then I'll let you know, and then we'll fix it together. I discovered the error. It was a spelling mistake on my part. Right here where it says ship size, it's not, ship size is not the variable we used. If we look in a create event of our ship, you'll see we use the term sprite size, not ship size. So I go back to thrust, and all I've got to do here is I got to change all these ships to sprite. And I can just copy this, copy, paste, 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 Control V to paste. Oops, got an extra character there. Okay, so now let's try it now. Let me zoom out here so you can kind of see the code. Well, I'll keep it zoomed in here so you can read it. Again, if you need to pause to type the code in, please do. All right, now I'm going to press play. Okay, now you see as I thrust out. No. Doesn't seem to be doing it. The error I had when I did this before, I had an error where my ship would, as the asteroids were fading out, or as the thrust was phasing out, the ship would also fade out. So I'm going to add the code anyway, just because if you've got anything else drawn on the screen, it will cause problems too. So you notice at the very first line we had it where we draw set alpha, image alpha. So this could be semi-transparent at some point. And if we draw anything else later on, this would still be set, and it might draw things at different transparencies. So what's a good practice when you do something like this, where you change the alpha setting, is at the end of the code, draw set alpha again, and set it to 1, like this. Okay, that way anything drawn after this will be drawn at full visibility, and you can change it at that point. Alright, so that's the thrust. Now if we play the game, we should not have any kind of interruption with the thrust as we cross across from side to side there. See, it's still, see when it comes off the screen there, you still see it fine. So it looks like our ship may be a little bit too fast too, so I might slow it down. In fact, let's do that right now before we exit here. So I'm going to go to the ship, go to the create event, and again, this is the beauty of doing all these at one point here. So I'm going to change my turning. I'm turning too fast, so I'm going to cut that in half to 1.5 from 3, and then my max speed I'm going to set to 10. Oh, not 100, 10. And just test it real quick to make sure it's okay. Okay, so that's all right. See, that works that's a little bit more manageable, I think. Okay. All right, so that looks good. Okay, that's the end of this video. In the next one, we will start making asteroids. See you then.